Thank you. If everyone can give a round of applause to the Koreatown Senior and Community Center. Thank you for coming and joining us for our 30th anniversary of 4.29. We'll be transitioning to our next group.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you're feeling good, say yeah. Can we give another round of applause for that amazing group one more time? My name is Matthew Cuban Hernandez. I am a representative of the organization Street Poets, Inc., and I'm here with a few of my colleagues, Alicia Wise, and a few other artists here from Rhythm Arts Alliance, and it's an honor to be here, y'all. Thank y'all so much for having us. We're going to share with y'all a couple things, some poetry, some movement, some sound, and without further ado, we'll take it away.
Check. Check. The air in my lungs is the air in your lungs. The air in my lungs is the air in your lungs. The air in my lungs is the air in your lungs. The air between us breathes life. Won't you be a better you for yourself first? Get to know why your lungs stretch, they do. Do you breathe? Shout yes. What for? Shout a name, not your own. Feel how your chest expands beyond your head or a house or an object you can hold. Everything made without love eventually falls down. Love is upright. Love is upright. Love is up, right? Won't you be seen? Be seen. Be seen. My friend Ethan said the body is a neighborhood of organs. Touch your heart and feel if it invites you over to eat each other. If you do not feed yourself, eat yourself. If you do not feed others, how far are you willing to go? What is the cost of your travels? The air in my air is the air in your lungs. The air between us breathes life. The air in my lungs is the air in your lungs. The air between us breathes life. So this poem is for the forgotten. For the child who learns the word drown before they learn the word swim. For the one who hears, come as you are, and reaches for a lifeboat or a gun or a prayer. This here is a whole prayer. Look into your neighbor's eyes and say, no weapon except the weapon I create against you shall wreak havoc, and even if shall not prosper. Ego shall not prosper. Greed shall not prosper. Hatred shall not prosper. This here is a whole prayer for you, the person in the presentation, the hurt and the harm. Dear human who art in my presence, hallowed be thy healing. Dear human, misinformed, misguided human, come back, come here to your entire self. I have always sought the essence of me. I have always wanted to have a neighbor like the you are afraid to become. Mine, be mine, be mine. At least for a moment, put your hand in my hand. Put your pulse to my pulse. Put your trust in whatever the heck makes sense after you try. Since we're together, we might as well try. Since we're together, we might as well say, I am here. I showed up. I see you. I am willing. I am a blank page, and I ask that you trust my rough draft. Won't you please? Won't you please? Please.
This poem is for the flame, for the engulf, the riots and the voiceless scream, the boiling of a pot or a community. This poem is for the rubble and the rebuild, the forest of hope blooming after the flood. This poem is for the block, for every block, for the times that's all we see and can never hold. It's a welcome home. It's a new business. It's everyone's business. It's a village only shaped by time and renewal. It's about the elders holding memories like ceremonies, wearing wrinkles like badges of I made it and I'm still here. This poem is for the burning, clearing the city like a canvas and asking the children to be the artist, to be an architect and shape the structure they want. This poem is for the need, the necessary listening, no longer a demand but a requirement, a prerequisite to loving the corners you ignore. This poem is for the ignored, but also for the ignorant, for those who only see history as ashamed or anything other than a modern revolution. It's not about the violence, it's about the violets pushing through the soil, to be loyal to a place that raised you, to be royal in all things local. This poem is for the movement, for the dancing free and calling our growth a block party, for the sweets, for the sweat summer heats never forgotten. This poem is for hope, for a future still under construction, but every hand holding the tools we need to call our own. Thank y'all so much. We are Street Poets, Inc. Give a round of applause for Rhythm Arts Alliance. Thank y'all so much for having us.
Let's keep that energy up. Give them a round of applause, guys. I mean, I feel full. I hope y'all feel full. Let me get myself situated up here. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Natalia Romo. I am Supervisor Mitchell's Justice Deputy, and beside me I have Daniel
Park, Deputy for Constituent Engagement. So first, we wanted to welcome everyone to the 2nd District's Racial Justice Learning Exchange. Today, we're commemorating the 30th anniversary of the 1992 LA uprisings and reflecting on our past, present, and future when it comes to our diverse communities.
This is our 3rd Racial Justice Learning event in our office, and it's great to see some of our familiar faces here who've been riding with us since the first event that we have. If this is your first time attending, the Racial Justice Learning Exchange is an initiative by Supervisor Mitchell that connects residents, county department, leadership, commissioners, and community organizations and leaders, community leaders, to build our joint capacity to address and confront biases and celebrate and share in our diversity and create meaningful steps to eliminate structural racism. It is our goal to increase literacy about racial justice, to celebrate racial justice leadership in the 2nd Supervisorial District, and to enhance the county's race equity work.
So today we have some great race equity champions on the panel. We hope you feel motivated and inspired from their experiences and a vision for a more equitable LA County. Before we begin the panel, we have a video clip that we wanted to share.
Protest properly.
A quarter
Well, the history of riots in the United States is more comparable to like the history of pogroms, in the sense that you have these sort of cases in the 18th and 19th century, even the early 20th century, in which, say, African Americans, for example, have been victims of white racial violence. You go back to Cincinnati in 1839 and 1842. You go back to all the sort of riots, the Memphis riot, 1866. In this case, the change was the destruction of Black economic and social institutions. But for the most part, the modern riot that we think of, that is the commodity riot and the riots, insurrections against police violence or state violence, really begin in the early 1960s.
I appreciate that distinction, but I just feel compelled to say that an empowered people can protest. Right. A historically disenfranchised group of people who feel they have nothing to lose and perhaps nothing to gain aren't empowered enough to protest. Right. That's why I will intentionally use the term rebellion, because it is a reaction to a circumstance, a living condition, a state of mind that I think doesn't allow you to protest properly.
Early 20th century, in which, say, African Americans, for example, have been victims of white racial violence. You go back to Cincinnati in 1839 and 1842. You go back to all the sort of riots, the Memphis riot, 1866. In this case, the change was the destruction of Black economic and social institutions. But for the most part, the modern riot that we think of, that is the commodity riot and the riots, insurrections against police violence or state violence, really begin in the early 1960s.
I appreciate that distinction, but I just feel compelled to say that an empowered people can protest. Right. A historically disenfranchised group of people who feel they have nothing to lose and perhaps nothing to gain aren't empowered enough to protest. Right. That's why I will intentionally use the term rebellion, because it is a reaction to a circumstance, a living condition, a state of mind that I think doesn't allow you to protest properly.
A quarter century later, anger lingers in South Los Angeles. This community rallying attention to problems like poverty still plaguing street corners that burned into the night back in 1992. In the years that followed, signs of hope. Investigations into the riots exposed critical flaws in the tactics of the LAPD. The department was forced to change.
Looking back, it was brutal.
Officer Steve Gordon worked the streets of South LA.
We had to change everything. The department had to be redefined.
Today, the community rebuilding, looking to the future. Old wounds still healing, 25 years to the day that sparked the flames of rebellion. Steve Patterson, NBC News, Los Angeles.
When I think back to the Watts Rebellion, my parents were social workers, literally in South LA during that time. I was born in '64, a year old. But you think about, King Hospital and so many of the services, so many of the shift in elected representation. If it wasn't for the Watts uprising, Tom Bradley may still be the only lone Black cop at LAPD. I mean, so there was a shift in terms of primarily services, WLCAC, Watts Labor Action Committee. Sure. So many programs and services, came into the area. 92, not so much. And I agree with you. I often tried to figure out the nexus between a successful Olympics and rebuild a city. And leadership means everything, and the right person at the helm. certainly sends a message, both, conscious and otherwise. And when you drive throughout South LA, we are such a segregated city and county, quite frankly. And so when you step outside of your box, your world, and drive into traditional South LA, Watts, Willowbrook, Compton, and you recognize that we still have food deserts where grocery stores never returned. Boys Market went away after the 92 uprising. Save-On drugstore, so many. Closer into my district, in the Ladera, Baldwin Hills, Jungle area, where we lost grocery stores. Fedco, Target came. But there are still plots of land that were never redeveloped. Their services have never returned.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Because I can't hear myself. Test, test. Hey, there we go. Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. With my staff who's standing there looking like they're ready to, do what? Come on and have a seat. Join with the community. They stand there at attention. We're standing here at attention in case the supervisor looks like she needs something. I need you all to come in and have a seat and join with our community. Beautiful. Thank you all. I know I make them nervous because in the middle of that I said, bring the chairs down here because that's too far. We didn't accommodate for the drummers. So did it hit you like it hit me about the role drumming plays in all cultures? Wasn't that phenomenal? And if you couldn't see it from where you were sitting, the connection between the drummers representing two different cultures was very powerful. They were talking to each other, the drums were talking to each other, and the rest of us were just bystanders. I'm Holly Mitchell, your LA County Supervisor, representing the 2nd District.
Check.
We had an amazing, this is going to be amazing too, but we also started today with an amazing experience. And the reason we have chosen to be here on this plot of land today, we had the groundbreaking for Evermont. Those of you who are from LA or South Los understand the importance and the sacredness of this plot of land that was a viable business strip over 30 years ago that burned down in 92. And I was reminded of the new museum in Alabama where dirt from hallowed ground where far too many African Americans lost their lives through lynchings are preserved in jars. And we acknowledge the power of that soil. And so when we recognize the significance of the dirt here and the history of this dirt, I picked that up for you, that this dirt reflects struggle, this dirt reflects pain and history, and this dirt now is going to reflect, don't you throw that at me, this dirt now is symbolic of rebirth and recovery and renewal. And I thought it was important to acknowledge that. And so I picked up some dirt for myself, and I picked up some dirt for my predecessor, who I invited to join me today, to acknowledge his vision and decades of committed leadership to this community, and specifically this plot of land. So that's your piece of dirt and my piece of dirt. And we'll be back in 2 years and walk through the 180 housing units. We will walk through the business complex. We will walk through the metro. We will walk through LA County's unit that will rebirth and rebuild and be an incubator for small businesses. We will walk through the seed school the first California, LA charter school for the children of this community who, in my humble opinion, deserve it. I know that Zocalo interview was a couple years ago based on that hair color and that youthful glow that is gone. But thank you. Somebody said, I still got it. I appreciate you. Thank you, Commissioner. You're going to get reappointed and reappointed. Thank you. But it's important as we talk about our future that we ground ourselves in where we were. You all know the 1992 civil unrest was not a single catastrophic event. It was yet another upheaval in this cycle. And we heard the professor talk about the interesting 30-year sequence of similar events. 30 years ago, in this community, we lost 50 lives. Many lost faith in our justice system. We lost generational wealth and investment, and many lost faith in their government. 30 years ago, we were part of a moment of collective rage, desperation, and exhaustion. Oh, but that is changing, and the winds are bringing forth the new energy and excitement. 50,000 square feet of commercial space, 180 units of affordable housing, the Seed School, 250 full-time family-sustaining jobs that will span across industries, including retail, education, and opportunities to work at Metro. That's what investment, determination, and opportunity looks like for this parcel of land, that dirt, today. And I'm very proud to be a part of it. So as you heard from my two team members, for us in the 2nd District, this isn't just about, we do not only pause on anniversaries like this. This is work that we've engaged all year long. This is our racial justice learning exchange. We started by inviting all of the commissioners who serve the 2nd District because we wanted to empower our commissioners with an orientation, a frame of reference of how we expected that they would represent us on LA County's 300+ boards and commissions, that we were going to deputize each other with information and power on how to combat racism, how to call it out and confront it when we see it and experience it. That's what this learning exchange is all about. This is our 3rd monthly gathering. We expanded it to include our county family. That was kind of an aha moment, and I want to thank all of the county department heads who have been with us typically on Saturdays. So this is our first Friday event. Thank you for going along with us in this journey because, LA County has an anti-racism initiative. We have focused equity in how we're using our new dollars coming from the federal government as a result of COVID. And so, again, this isn't a one and done. This is an experience. It's a shared learning experience. And again, I'm really glad you're all with us. So today, on the heels of the unearthing of the dirt for Evermont, where we were joined by all of those various partners, I told them it was like a family reunion. And you know how we do family reunions. There have been some divorces. There have been new marriages, new babies have been born. And so that collection of partners is a different collection than the people who envisioned it 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But we have all come together doing this family reunion to make sure it happens, and that I made a commitment then, and I will share it with you, that this will be the last ribbon cutting where nothing gets built on that plot of land. That's my commitment to the community. I make you a promise and come back in 2 years and call me a lie if you want to, but in 2 years, there's going to be a whole bunch of beautiful things going on out there. I want to thank former Councilwoman Ruth Galanter for joining us today. Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Cornell West for joining us today. I want to thank the man who needs no full name, just 3 letters, MRT, for joining us today. I'm going to save my thanks for all of the food vendors and the performers and all that for my wrap. So let's get started with the way in which we're going to do this dialogue today. I'm really excited to introduce to some, and, well, I guess it's introduction because of COVID. Everybody been put up and shut up and behind masks. Dr. Ferreira, I only don't have my mask on because I'm outside and the wind is blowing. Because I do everything Dr. Ferreira tells me to do. I'm excited to introduce you to 2 very special people who are important in my own life, in my own growth and development as an Angelino. And I know we're going to have an exciting conversation. I am not going to spend time giving you their lengthy bios. As my 21-year-old would say, you can Google it. Brenda Shockley is the Deputy Mayor and Chief Equity Officer for the City of Los Angeles. Come on up, Brenda. In response to 1992, Deputy Mayor Shockley founded Community Build. And she was telling my very young staffers about her experiencing walking this very block with Congresswoman Maxine Waters and the then chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank, Alan Greenspan, talking about what opportunity could potentially look like. Through her work at Community Build, more than $100 million of investment in education, employment, and training programs for young people in South LA came to fruition. My brother from another mother, John Kim, Executive Director of the Advancement Project. If you want some education on the history of James Brown, ask John Kim. In his role, John has helped community organizations to combat inequities in our systems. I know John has memories of being in this area and seeing the interactions between his Korean family and our black community, and I look forward to hearing more about that. The Advancement Project California has brought to the forefront tools that help policymakers like myself to see the burdens our families and communities face on a daily basis. He's developed an amazing new tool, the Justice Equity Need Index, which identifies the areas in greatest need of public investments in the community that require healing, health, prevention, and help to reverse historical injustice. We have used the index and suggested that others use the index and told the governor about the index, and so we are promoting the index. I'm very grateful to you both for agreeing to join with us today and for being in this process, this learning exchange with us, and hope that we make new connections, that we all learn something new, remember something that perhaps we've forgotten, but most importantly, make commitments anew to ourselves and our communities today. You ready to get started? So, because we're grounding today's exercise or experience in acknowledging the civil unrest of 1992, what, from your perspective, you heard what I said in 2015, tell me from your perspective some of the root causes of the uprising from your lens. You go, Brenda.
Okay, how do I do this? Thank you. My feeling about it is very similar to what the supervisor expressed, except she was a bit, I think, more diplomatic. 1992, and I have to say, I have to be at least among the elders of the elders, because as I told her staff, they get a twofer. I was here in 65. I was a college student in 65 working for Mary Henry for the summer. So for me, it's that cycle is very real. And yes, I'm Madison Shockley's sister. I see your face, and I know how I have a brother who actually, were he here, would be sitting here because he started the Korean Black Dialogue, and when he was the pastor at Church of Christian Fellowship. So I do. I come here representing the family, if you will. But one of the things that's so important is to recognize that the cycle, it's 30 years because each time it's been because there's been that bit more of oppression, that bit more of disinvestment, that bit more of lack of training, that bit more that people had found a way to kind of get by, and then down on the neck it comes again. And as Supervisor said, in terms of the question of rebellion and versus revolt, I'll leave that to those who are far better with words. But what I will say, and I'm going to Florence and Normandy, which is now sort of commemorated as the flashpoint. What it said to me was that when you leave people where their only power is to destroy, you strip them of their ability to engage, you strip them of their ability to vote. When you have that, then you are not going to be able to just sort of soothe that, because it is an open wound that has festered so long. So many of us had the Langston Hughes, if you're of my generation, there was a poem that said, "What happens to a dream deferred?" And for those of us in a certain era, there was a beautiful poster that we all had, because the question was, what happens? Does it dry up or does it explode? And I think in 1992, in some ways not that different, the 1992 and 1965 shared the conflict with the police as the jumping off point. In the case of 1992, it was when nothing happened to the police. In 1965, with Parker, and the police were just so vicious that it made Johnny Cochran's career. I think also we forget that by the time 92 occurred, we had 12 years of Republican administrations. We'd had both terms of Reagan, and we were fighting to keep Bush 1 from getting a second term. During those 12 years, everything that had been really done, and for some of us, we remember the New Frontier, and we remember model cities, and we remember CETA programs. We remembered these efforts for neighborhood revitalization, a recognition that you had to have community participation. And out of it, we got the Drew School and the hospital and other things. In 92, there had been no training programs. There had been no EOP was under education, any education opportunities they were striking out to reduce and eliminate. So that by that time, by that day when the Rodney King verdict, as we call it, came out, people had it. And there is that moment when a feather is enough because of what people have endured. I know there are more questions, so I'll stop there.
So I've been overruled. Apparently the people in the back can neither see you or hear very well because of the wind, and we can't turn the mics up any louder. So let's go back up on the stage. So John, why don't you run up on stage, take the mic, go on the stage, and we'll move the chairs.
Hello. All right. I would prefer, actually, to be on stage, given my vertical challenge. So I'm totally down with the move. Thank you so much, Supervisor, for the invitation, and to the team at the Supervisor's office. Was excited to accept the invitation. Did not know I'd be here in between the Deputy Mayor, a Supervisor, and Dr. West. So a little nerve-wracking, to be sure. But I also have a clean sense of family while I'm here. I've seen people who are a part of the movement family. It was great to hear some Korean drumming, which I played for about 20 years. And then I come to find that the extraordinary Alicia Wise, who performed the poetry, is actually my daughter's poetry teacher. And so we are surrounded by family, and so thank you so much for that. A little bit about a family story that I tell sometimes around 92 and what happened and what the roots were. You know, I grew up here. I was born on 2nd in Vermont, and my father would drive me around when I was a youngster to his friends' stores, right? They were small business owners, and some of them had liquor stores here in South LA. And, you know, I kind of grew up in the back storage rooms, right? My dad would drive us over and send me to the back storage room while him and his buddies chatted. And, you know, oftentimes I would come out of the back storage room and I'd hear shouting. I'd hear yelling. And it would be, unfortunately, my father's friend, who may have been educated in Korea as an engineer or a PhD or what have you, sitting behind a cluttered counter, behind plexiglass, yelling at the top of his lungs to a customer, oftentimes, too often, an African-American customer who for some reason was feeling disrespected and being disrespected in his own neighborhood using his own money. And too often I would see this scene. Thank you. And so, you know, one of the things that I've come to really understand about that scene from my childhood is that it's one thing to look at who of these two men were wrong. Which one was it? The one that was looking to be respected in their own neighborhood? Or was it the one that was looking to protect something that they fought their entire lives for in terms of their store? And over time, I've come to understand that it's not about looking for bad people. It's about looking for bad systems. And that we were all in a system, all of us, that sapped both of these men of their potential and that pit us in this place to go at each other. And that's the system that caused the uprising, the system of white supremacy, the system of structural racism that says, how do you keep an old structure, an old power structure in place? How do you keep segregation alive? How do you keep extracting from communities of color and pit them against one another? That whole system and the answer to those questions is why, unfortunately, we got 92, why we got 65, why we got 2020, and why we have today. And so there's a lot of roots here for us to unearth, but just a little bit about how I saw it growing up as a youngster here in LA.
Thank you for telling the plexiglass story, because that's important to understand it from everyone's perspective. So you talked about the 65 rebellion, as my father would call it.
I did.
And you talked about the investment of the institutions that were built as a result. You talked about MLK Hospital and Cal State Dominguez and the community college and St. John's and all those institutions. So what are your thoughts about what we've learned about doing economic development since 1992, given your history and your role? What did we learn? Because we acknowledged repeatedly this morning that it took 30 years for us to get here today. And that's unfortunate that it took so long. So what have you learned about economic development?
Well,
Pull it out, Brenda. Pull it out and hold it in your hand. Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to work backwards because driving over here, I thought about, and amazed at how it seems like yesterday, that day when everybody, in my opinion, I thought they were just going to show up at First AME. We were all heartbroken about the verdict, and they would light some candles, and Chip Murray would say something soothing. We would be angry, but we would go about our business. That just reflected the time that had passed for me between being 19 or 18 in 1965 and having sort of maneuvered the system and seen how there was this constant sort of undermining and redirecting of really, really fine ideas and efforts. When I saw actually the next day from Quincy Jones's offices in Burbank, I saw Fedco burning and my own personal cleaners, where I never was able to retrieve half of what I owned because it was in there. I realized that then we were fighting disinvestment. That's what we were doing here with Ms. Waters, walking with Greenspan, talking about what we needed, on and on. And even today, as you mentioned, we are now have a different, interesting, but not really different in terms of its potential threat. And now we're facing gentrification. And for some days, I'm not sure. When I look at Leimert Park, I look at what's going to happen when all of what you've described occurs. I worry, and yet in another sense, and this goes to your question about what has changed, out of 92, while there was some government involvement, much of it was from Washington, D.C., much of it was corporate America coming out, promises and promises. Well, don't you know, Hurricane Andrew came about 6 months later. All those people who had set up their various shops and all, overnight were gone. Overnight, they took their promises and their commitments and their goodwill and moved to what was the next, quote, disaster. But out of it came a network and a structure that you see today. And that is the rise of the nonprofit sector. The power of the nonprofit sector, because by definition, we really evolved out of the community. So when we created Community Build, we knew that according to the census, African Americans would be, if there was going to be an identifiable community 30 years later, like today, would be Leimert Park, because that was where you had the concentration of African Americans. And based on the census, many people who lived in this community were moving to what people affectionately call the IE now. I call it a 2.5-hour commute, personally.
Right. And when I moved there at 13, I called it hell.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I saw the supervisor over the weekend, and we were talking with someone else about Riverside, and she was sort of, I don't know what to think. I said, it's Friday the 3rd. You know how there's Friday and then Friday 2? Well, that's where the people in the movie Friday, that's where they all moved, was to Riverside, San Bernardino. So those who were left were pretty much left in concentrated numbers in and around the Crenshaw area. And I don't know, I'm sure someone from his office is here, or if Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson is here, because Destination Crenshaw is real. And Destination Crenshaw. But it doesn't have to just be that. And that's what's sort of cool right here. Destination Vermont is real too. And we don't have to abandon one place in order to build another. I think that, and I look at so many of my colleagues, I look at where the supervisor came from Crystal Stairs, child care referral services that has managed to be a part of everything that has anything to do with children. Community Coalition that really has spawned a mayoral candidate, and where we were able to work together. My own, obviously, heart of hearts, Community Build, which not only is in Leimert Park, but I am proud to say finished the first HH project at 88th in Vermont, where we also have, and continue to have, we have 72 units of housing and then over 9,000 square feet of community services, including the mental health services from SHARP. I say all that, I see CRCD, I see Charisse, I see all of us, we became our own kind of family that really reflected that sort of historic, almost innate sense of do for self. And in the last 30 years, when I think about the colleagues and I think about where change happened and how change happened, it was when the nonprofit sector really became a profession. Mm-hmm. Before that, there were CACs, Community Advisory Committees, and there were PACs, project area committees. There were community people who were working as hard as they could, but they had jobs every day. And this was volunteer work. And fortunately, and I won't bore you with the history, but fortunately you go back as far as Bobby Kennedy and the Ford Foundation that recognized the value and importance of community development and community development corporations, that now you look around and some of your largest employers, whether it's Kedron, whether it's King, whether it's Drew, whether it's you name it, we not only are able to deliver the services in response to what the community needs, but we're also able to employ the people right here in the community.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree. So Brenda talked about the role of philanthropy in the private sector in terms of bringing money in and the nonprofit sector, but talk to me from your perspective about the post-92 landscape and the fight for racial equity in public budgeting since 1992. That's near and dear to my heart. Budget chair, I follow the money all the time. We had a budget town hall last night because I want the community to learn how to follow the money. So talk about the role of public budgeting in this sphere.
Hello? Oh, I'm going to just do that. Okay. And it's hard to get this question from Supervisor Mitchell. In Sacramento, when she was up there, she was widely known as someone who don't mess around when it comes to budgets. And so it's great to have you here at the county. So the thing that I've learned some time ago in Buddhism, they say if you love something, the way to fix it is you smack it on the side. Like a thing that you love, like a vase. If you want to figure out how you fix a vase, you give it a good smack on the side, because then you can see where the cracks are, where you can see where the attention needs to be paid. And 92 was not only a smack on the side of this city and this country, but 92 was also a smack on the side of the movement in terms of racial justice and in terms of nonprofits. There was a way of doing things that was maybe a bit too siloed by race or by industry or by issue when it came to the movement. And 92 was a moment to say, actually, we're going to have to figure out a different kind of playbook. How do we figure out how to deepen our racial solidarity across institutions and across communities in a way that is not so transactional, that is cultural, but even beyond that? And so that was one evolution, I think, in terms of the movement organizations that said, hey, we're going to really have to fix how we see each other across races. The other way that the movement has really matured since 92 is that providing services is critical. Cultural exchange and learning is critical. But to really push systems, power is the most important thing. So how do you build power? How do you sustain power through organizing? Many of the groups that Brenda's mentioned, many of the groups represented here have become PhDs in power building in the city that would rather not hear us sometimes. And the power ensures that the city and county has to listen to these organizations, these movement groups, and these voters. And so power building has really matured since '92. And, you know, we had a moment last year after the first wave of the pandemic, or first couple of waves of the pandemic, and we had $1.9 billion coming in from the federal government to LA County. $1.9 billion is nothing to sneeze at, from the American Rescue Plan. And some of us were like, hey, how do we make sure that those communities that were the most impacted by this pandemic are the first in line for that money? Because usually at the county, when money comes in, it's all divide by 5. 5 supervisors, you all get your even cut, even if you don't have the same issues. It's divide by 5. And could we, for once, possibly get it to use equity to distribute the money? And lo and behold, we had a champion now at the inside that said, hey, I'm done with that too. I'm done with the divide by 5 as well. And so we brought, with the Community Coalition, Inner City Struggle, SEIU 2015, and 30, 40 other organizations saying, hey, we could build an index to use data to show which zip codes are in the highest need. We can show how to build a funding mechanism and use the anti-racism initiative within the county to actually move that $1.9 billion by equity to the highest need communities. And lo and behold, she got the votes, the motion passed, and now $1.9 billion is moving towards equity. So it's not just sitting from the outside, right? It's not just sitting on the outside. It's working with the inside to actually make some real change.
I had just convinced them all that that was my bright idea, and you just... It was teamwork. It was teamwork. What do the cycles of police brutality, injustice in the legal system, and social upheaval say about structural racism? And how do we really do racial equity work? You know, I think racial equity and you're on mute are two of the overused phrases of these last 36 months. Now, everybody knows what it means when we say, you're on mute. And we all say it together, like, right? But what does racial equity work look like, feel like, and how do you know it when it's in front of you, and how do you know when it's missing in action?
So LA County is 170 years old. This constitution by way of this country by way of constitution is 233 years old, and neither of these things were built for us. Neither of these systems had our best interest in mind when they were designed, and they were designed by experts that were elegant in their design and baking into these systems after generation about how to keep certain people out and let certain people in. And when we get moments like 92 and 65 and 2020, the thing that I always worry about is we lose sight of that 170-year picture, of that 233-year picture, because it's not going to take 6 months to turn that around. You can't take something that's been baking for 170 years in LA County and just expect 6 months to flip that switch. Now, taking to the streets, demanding justice, calling out bad actors, all those are absolutely critical, but we got to start designing like they designed against us. We got to do that hard, rigorous work, right? To investigate, to be sometimes patient and to be sometimes impatient, to really kind of push, but we can't give up if it doesn't change in a year or so. The last thing I'll say is this, you know, and this is something from my own personal journey. The thing about white supremacy is that it's a system but it's also a poison that, let's just be real, all of us have ingested, right? Many in my community, it's almost like when you get off the plane, here, have some of this, right? Some of us, when we're born here, have some of this. And it's a little bit like a lens that shades, unfortunately, us to see ourselves away from what the reality is, and us to see each other, right, in a different way than is the reality. And so the work is out there, but the work is also inside, so that we can figure out, how do we get this poison out of our system? How do we change the lens so we don't see each other as different, but we see each other as brothers and sisters in this fight?
Every learning exchange, I've been able to witness an aha moment. Our first event at Sony Studios, a commissioner came up to me and said, I get it. I understand why you're doing this, and I understand my role as your appointee, what I'm supposed to do. When you were speaking, sister right here in the second row said, I saw the aha moment. Something you said triggered. And so, Team Mitchell, we got this. We're changing lives and expanding minds. Spreading knowledge. This is going to be the last question, and we're going to open it up. And it's not for questions. We're going to have an assignment for you. But since the wind is trying to take us away, Brenda, what do you think are the key racial justice imperatives today that will define equity in the future?
Well, I
think it's on. Can you hear her?
Can you hear me? Yeah, now you can. As I was listening, I was thinking about how we have to have all the data. Is unplugged? Back. We have to be able to anticipate those who are committed to maintaining their advantage. As Chief Equity Officer for the City of Los Angeles, Chief Equity, but it's all about race. And for me, it's become a duality. That yes, there are those of us who can spend all day and night talking about what happened, what's different now, about the nuances of it, the sustainable development goals, all of that. And all of that is important to building the infrastructure of equity. But I think in the meantime, and at the same time, we have to translate equity for those who are receiving the least of it. And as I hear about the 1.9 billion and, you know, some fraction of that also came to the city. And by the way, the city is actually getting to the point where their mathematics is only divide by 15. Based on data, because we do communicate despite what they say, the county, the city, the advocates. And I'll end with the experience I had in '92 when Community Build is on the other side, on the south side, had its youth center on the south side of Manchester. Community Coalition was on the north side. And there was always this sort of, okay, and of course at the time everybody thought money was just going to be flowing down Vermont. So it was like, how are we going to do this so that we are together? And I'll have to say, and I'll never forget, because it only took one meeting. Karen Bass and I met at the Roscoe's on Main and Manchester. And you remember that? And yes, the only place at the time. And we talked about what the system was expecting and how the system could use a way to sort of pit us against one another. And we thought about the community we served, and we came to an agreement that Community Build had started already and was very good at delivering services, working with the gang peace, working with the children in the community, LA Bridges, all of those contracting that was made available. Community Coalition was seriously the lead on advocacy, particularly, obviously, most of us know about the liquor stores, but then on around the issues of foster youth and the issues around LAUSD and organizing. We were able, without even a handshake, but a sisterly nod, say, when it's advocacy, we'll let you take the lead, and you can count on us. And when it's services, we'll take the lead, and we'll be sure to make sure we address and bring in your people. I say all this to say that, yes, while we sort of talking heads figure out how to deal with the last 200 years, there has to be something here in the community that shows there is hope. We can't just talk about it. And thus, to me, and I am proud because there's so many who would have loved to be sitting in this chair who aren't with us anymore. At Mount 75, I see clearly. And I see and I know that the one thing, whether you've been in reentry, whether you're foster youth, whether whatever, the one thing that has changed people fastest and more permanently and given a sense of pride and flowed into the community is employment. And that 1.9 billion here and the 800 million in the city and the God knows how much is going through LAWA and the rest of it, we have to have people living and earning at a livable wage if we are ever going to avoid, and with the warp speed these days, it won't be 30 years next time. It'll be collapsed a lot shorter. And I say this, and I absolutely believe that the community college system is there. The smartest thing I've seen is even when they were under-enrolled, they kept those bond issuances, they kept those campuses up. Every one of them is a place anyone should be proud to go. And that's where we can do for us. Because some people don't have the luxury of waiting for the report to come out.
That's true.
They don't have the luxury to waiting for the bill to get passed.
That's right.
And many of us in here do have the ability to pressure and make sure that, and that's where equity comes in, getting people what they need. I mean, we can go back and forth about equity, equality, and whatever. I've come to feel it's almost like pornography. You know it when you see it.
MRT, I don't know it when I see it. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what she's talking about, Brenda. I don't know what you're talking about. Was that powerful? Give them a round of applause. I love you. I love you. And you all stayed out here with Mother Nature showing out. And so we appreciate you. Many of you have said, oh, I'm here to support you. I appreciate that, but I want you to understand this isn't about you supporting me. This is about 2nd District staff creating the space and opportunity for us to come together and learn. So this is about us, and I appreciate you showing up, but I want you to show up for yourself, the departments you lead, the commissions you serve on, and the communities that you live, work, recreate, and worship in. So thank you all for coming. So you should have cards. Now, you see, I know this group. This is the group that is going to sit back there and try to figure out the hardest question they can come up with to stump us. We're not going for that. So before you get to ask your question, what you have to do is make a public declarative statement about what you intend to do in your work to keep this history alive or to heal and to find solutions to the persistence of structural racism. Remember, this is a racial justice learning exchange. So before all the tents and everything blows away, we're asking you, if you've got a question, that's fine. We know some of you submitted questions online as a part of your RSVP. I appreciate you. And those really smart young people I've hired, they will answer them for you because they have the answers. But whatever you have today, again, before you stand up, you have to make your declarative statement before all of us about what you intend to do. You can go on my website and see what I'm doing. We are convening. We are talking about it. But we need to hear from you all what you all intend to do. Got some cards for me, Daniel? I stumped everybody telling them they had to make their declarative statement first. While you're thinking about that, let me just say that I want to make sure you all have the date so you can calendar it for our next Racial Justice Learning Exchange gathering. It'll be May 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the A.C. Bilbrew Library. We'll be discussing the Civil War origins of Cinco de Mayo. And then after our May gathering, it will be our Juneteenth event, which is really where we launched this last Juneteenth. So I'm waiting for cards and questions you may have, but I'm really looking for commitments you all are making to yourselves and all of us. I'll give you this in case you want to answer something. If the county was able to use its eminent domain powers to transform this plot, what about the hundreds of others still vacant since 1992? You see all that gray hair in the front of his hair? You see all this coming in my hair? Let me tell you what that's from. That's from Bruce Beach and this plot of land. Let me just say, the uniqueness of this opportunity. This was a plot of land, privately owned, by someone who owns multiple parcels throughout South LA. I didn't hear you. Well, okay, you hear what he said it, and I didn't. But you're gonna read in between the lines as I tell you my story. Who is intentionally holding this property and leaving it vacant? Willfully holding the property. I don't know what you're frowning for. Willfully holding the property vacant. And so it took courage. Because, eminent domain has a real checkered past in our history. And so for someone to have the vision to use eminent domain to the benefit of the community is a new concept. The county has stepped our toe in that, and we're still fighting in court, truth be told. So it may look a little easier to you all than it really is. So let me just make this statement as the current county supervisor. Let's get this done free and clear and built, and then you can come back and ask me that question. Let's finish this. It's not as easy as it may appear. And it really requires the support of the community to lean in hard, to talk about what we're not going to stand for anymore. It's going to take, Brenda talked about the community-based organizations. There's some CBOs here today that are rolling who intend to buy up property and do big things. And we intend to partner with you in doing just that. That's the culture shift that we are beginning to experience and see. But we've got to find people who are willing to be their partner and really ask the question, why does it behoove you to allow us to pass by this intersection for 30 years and be further insulted and have that wound continue to fester with no development and vitality in our community? That is problematic, and collectively together we're going to work to change that. Robert Cole always comes to these things to ask tough questions. Robert, law enforcement, LAPD, seems to be the catalyst for both the 65 and 92 events, rebellions. Have we done enough to prevent another rebellion in the future? So I think that should apply to both LAPD and the sheriff. Have we done enough to prevent another rebellion in the future? And thank you, Robert. He says, I will educate my kids about the past, present, and future of social justice. Have we done enough? LAPD. Law enforcement seems to be the catalyst for both of the 65 and 92 uprisings. Have we done enough to prevent another one?
If we're being honest with each other, I don't think the answer we could say to each other is yes. This sheriff that we have now, there's a lot to be said, and maybe this isn't the perfect forum to say it, but the questions of transparency and accountability is a problem for these departments. We have very few levers to actually really hold people and officers accountable. And there are steps that should be taken at the federal and state level and locally that there is not the kind of political alignment to actually get these things done. And so, I don't think we can say it's not going to happen again. And it breaks my heart to tell my kids that as we commemorate 92 every year, that this is not going to happen again. I cannot say that to them. And I know you guys can't say that to your families. And so I do think there's a lot of structural stuff underneath these departments. It is sometimes the bad actor at the top. But sometimes I worry we spend too much time there, and we have to figure out what are the dynamics, the incentives, and the status quo that we got to shake the ground and not just revolve who's at top. So I think the answer is no.
I'd also like to add that the lack of accountability is there. It remains. And probably nothing more exemplifies it than 1 year ago, there was supposed to be $100 million reprogrammed in the city of Los Angeles from the police department to community organizations, to community policing, but to be programmed with the involvement of the community. A year later, the city's budget, and defund the police, and that was what they used so much to sort of to draw that line that anyone who isn't for it must be trying to defund it, and so therefore I don't have any choice but to be for it, that kind of attitude. The reality is that this year the budget has over $100 million increase projected or recommended for the police department. And a lot of that goes to the power of the police unions. And it goes to the ability of the police to create fear in the community. And I honestly believe that, yes, there's dramatic crime like smash and grab, and God, how sad about Jackie Avant. But those incidents are used to claim that there's a crime wave and that crime is so much more, and it's not true. And this is where looking at the data and looking at the numbers will tell you. But when you create that kind of fear in the public and you blame it on lack of resources, then you get promises, which is like a Helen of Troy kind of hiding what they really wanted, and that's more police. But it's not based in fact. And this is where meetings like this are so critical, because the information that is being given out and the excuse it becomes to harass to violate even more people's civil rights. All of that is manufactured to create fear. And that's them. Everybody wants to be safe. But it have to be so careful not to give a license then, because Nordstrom somebody smashed and grabbed. To give a license that then you can stop, you can detain, you can do anything to anyone, because we're in the midst of such a frightening crime wave, when it's not true.
I don't know about you, but I think we had some church here today, under the tent and everything. There was some church had today. Some truth has been spoken, some knowledge has been shared, and I hope that you all, are connecting and having conversation with each other. To the nonprofits in the room, there's a whole lot of county department heads over there to my left. Don't look, but they're sitting right there. I would hope that you would go and make a connection and meet the director of our Department of Public Health, meet the director of the Natural History Museum, meet those who are in our justice systems on the good side, public defenders, meet, did I say LACTA? Did I say DSS? And folks that I'm missing. Meet the registrar of voters. You better go meet the registrar and make sure you're ready to vote in June. Meet my new county family, who I must say to you all, who I've perhaps known and worked with longer, have been amazingly welcoming to me and my team, who at least don't visibly roll their eyes when I come up with these harebrained ideas like the Racial Justice Learning Exchange, or to launch the largest guaranteed basic income program in the country. Or when we say that we're not going to divide by 5, that we are going to overinvest in hardly reached communities. They have stood with us and stood up the programs in record time to get the dollars you talked about out in the street. At our board meetings, we have a standing agenda item where we hear from them in terms of how quickly our ARPA dollars are rolling. And, I grew up with that theory that, the county, then you roll your eyes. Well, I'm a believer. The county is where the action is, and the county made things happen for all of you as county residents in the middle of this public health pandemic. Thank you, Saul, who is helping my team frame and envision what it means to have a racial justice learning exchange, because we're making it up as we go, but so far so good. Let me say, I'm on the Metro board, very exciting work. One of our neighbors wanted to make sure that people who live in the community know that tomorrow from 9 to 1, the Vermont Transit Corridor Community Listening Session. Please go, because I'm fighting for you every day on the Metro board to really make sure that transit is what we need for it to be. And I need your help. And so if you live in this community and you can go to this listening session, they are listening. I was impressed. They've had 8,000 people respond to their customer survey that we really insisted that they do. Stephanie Wiggins is a partner in the Seed School and a partner in this development. And she's here. I don't see her. Thank you, Ms. Wiggins. I see you. And because she's here, I'm not going to say I'm fighting for a fairless system, because she's sick of me talking about fairness. I got a friend. Ms. Wiggins, I got a friend in the fairless fight. She is a partner, and I am working hard to support her in her leadership, and she is working hard to support our community. Because when I tell her the Vermont line is the busiest bus line and we can't have cancellations, the next board meeting, they have work to fix it. So thank you. We had a lot of partners to make this happen today. So I want to thank the Koreatown Senior and Community Center for their drumming performance, the Street Poets, Rhythms Arts Alliance, Vendedores en Acción, Toss It Up Salad, LA Commons, and KYCC, my homies. Thank you for coming out and really being a meaningful partner in this work. We intentionally did this on today's date because of the groundbreaking, and we know that there will be a week-long of events to commemorate, to remember. And my ask of you is that we don't just do that once a year. We're doing the Racial Justice Learning Exchange as a gathering experience on a monthly basis because we can't talk about racial justice one day a year. Be that King Day, be that the anniversary of the uprising, be that whatever. This is work that we can only affect culture change if we commit to doing it on a regular basis. So again, our next event, May 18th, 5 to 7 at the AC Bill Brew Library. We'll have a facilitated conversation with Dr. Hayes Batista, focusing on increasing public literacy on the origin of Cinco de Mayo as an anti-Confederacy holiday. You gonna learn today. Again, as I thank my two for joining us and our special guests for joining us, thank you so much. We ask that you continue to figure out what you can do in your everyday work to keep this history alive, to heal, and to find solutions to the persistence of structural racism. Everybody have a great weekend, and thank you for coming out. We appreciate you.